humans, hippies, earthlings, whoever you are, whatever you're doing, and whoever you're lucky enough to be doing it too. I'm Bushka on Blitz, and I just can't wait to get involved. This is tanking at its finest. I'm in sunny San Diego at the moment. I finally got a bit of free time. The missus is over here working, but we had a few days before we kicked off the work commitments, and we've just been cruising around, kayaking, eating our fill, and checking out the tourist bits. Today I went down to the cafe to actually do a bit of tanking on the NA server with all my good buddies on the NA server, and of course it was time for a scheduled maintenance. Apparently tomorrow there's going to be a patch. So yeah, the tanking outlook is slim to none. So I figured if I'm not tanking, I may as well finish off a couple of videos I've been working on. And this is one of them. This is something that I think has been overdue. I've been featuring a lot of TD and a very limited amount of tactical heavy stuff. We've done some reviews, but for the most part, it's been about individual tanks and their performance and the reviews of those tanks, and not so much about the big boys, the heavies, the guys that side scrape and go hull down and just do a lot of damage holding a line. And that's the two tanks that I'm looking at today, the ST1 and the E75. And I'm using those two tanks because they're fairly representative of the two main real heavy tank types that we have in the game. The hull down monsters like a T29 or a T32 or a T34 or an ST1. And the real buggers who are fairly solid turret wise, not as strong as those hull down monsters, but excellent at side scraping, like a KV3 or an E75 or a T150 or a VK4502B, those kind of tanks. And I'm going to talk about, one, how you should be playing them if you want to play them as true heavies. And we're not talking about the Conquerors and the M103s and all those kind of tanks here, because while the M103 is indeed a fantastic tank and the IS-8 is a fantastic tank, they're far removed from a tank like the ST1 or the E75, which are brutes. They're absolute brutes. They're strong arm men. They want to get out there. They want to put damage into the enemy, but they more or less want to hold a line and bounce shots. And that's important to remember. It's a fine definition. So I'm going to have a look at both tanks and the way they perform and how we use them. And first up, we're going to have a look at the E75. We're going to have a look at a little game on Vineyards. And I want to talk about the obvious stuff first. If you're going to be driving an E75, you have to learn how to side scrape. You should know how to side scrape in any tank. We're going to get to side scraping. Don't worry about that. We're also going to talk about how you have to be map aware, and we always talk about this, but if you look at the E75 here, there's a simple rule of thumb. You want to be pointing the chassis of the tank at about 20 degrees all the time to any possible incoming fire. And you'll see, as I set up, the tank is always slightly angled to any incoming fire. And you'll do that because the sides are exceptionally flat and very, very easy to pen. They're thick, but they're easy to pen when they're flat. If you angle them slightly, they become very, very bouncy because they are flat. You can see as soon as that conk's coming in, I start angling the tank. Now, you're not going to guaranteed bounce every shot because your lower glacis is never going to be strong enough to make that happen, and heat will oftentimes just go straight through the turret facing, but it's not easy, and you're narrowing down the options on the enemy. You also want to move from one strong point to the next. Now, you saw I was behind a hill going hull down against two tanks. I'm now behind a rock, and I'm going to try to side scrape off here to put shots into this Conqueror. Now, there's also a T110E4. Now, you know how I told you about the flat sides, and we're going to talk about this. And you want to be angling your tank so that all the enemy sees is very, very red sides, and it's a very, very difficult proposition. And the closer you are, the E75 can actually be incredibly successful side hugging because its upper glacis is phenomenally strong, and it's got these flat sides. So when you cozy it right up against an object, it's very, very easy for it to bounce shots. Now, I'm going to go sideways here because all I want to do is put one into the sides of this T110E4, and I'm going to stop because if I do that and we hit that, then Rich will kill him in one shot. But you'll see the flat sides, very, very easy to pen. You never want to be on its side, and you have to be aware at all times of who you're side scraping to. Now, this is side scraping in a nutshell. You'll see that's the angles I'm talking about. That IS-6, when he's turning left to right, it goes from red to clear, and now he's flat on the side and he gets killed. There's another IS-6 there, and there's two IS-8s. Now, I want to angle up towards the IS-8 directly ahead of me. The IS-6 has a lot of trouble penning the E75, and so long as I don't flatten my sides out too much, that IS-6 should have a whole lot of trouble penning me. And this is my thought process anyway. So I'm pulling back here, and I've got my sides very close to that rock so that I can pull out, bounce shots, pull back around, get shots in. There's a very easy shot there on that IS-8. I've bounced 2 shots now from the left, and then I'm going to put a shot in and push back up into the rock. Now that's side scraping. All the guy in front of me can see, and I'm going to give you a look at it. There's going to be an inset pop up in just a second, and you can see I'm angling my side so it is absolutely flat with the left edge of the rock in front of me, and that's stopping the IS-8 and everyone else from seeing. And they can't see the green part because there is a rock there. All they can see is that red part down the side of my tank. But there is an IS-6 further on the left, and you know how you talk about flat sides? The flat side is when you over-angle the tank and you turn it too much to face one target, and it loses that red effective armor, because the theory is the bullet has to, or the round has to go through a much thicker armor part when it's slightly angled, and the flatter it gets, the lower the armor it has to go through. And this is what the IS-6 can see. He can see a lot more side, a lot more of that flat side. He is on my left, so I'm side scraping to the IS-8, who saw all that red, and shooting him, which is all well and good, and I'm disregarding the IS-6 because I've already bounced him once, and he switched over to a big heat shell, and he is going to hit me just above my left drive wheel, and bang. Pens me. That's side scraping. You've got to be aware at all times of where the enemy is, because if you're side scraping to someone in front of you and there's someone slightly to an angle on either side and they can get shots on flatter armor profiles, you'll be cactus. But that's exactly how you mitigate incoming damage in a tank like the E75. Now the E75 is mobile enough to do this, and it's got a big ass armor profile, but it's not a damage per minute machine. That job is generally left up to the mediums and light tanks of this world. They have much better armor, much better guns for pumping out damage. You see here again, I'm just angling off and then pushing back up and side scraping. Now I'm side scraping to the left. The guys down the left can't hit me, and I'm waiting till the coast is clear on the right, and I'm pushing up and taking a shot with a flat side because I know they can't see me and there is someone up there spotting for me. And then I push forward and I side scrape to anyone who is on my left down that narrow alleyway. But what about the ST1? Well, the ST1 can do that, but it can also go hull down. And hull down's a very simple proposition. You can see that M103 there. I've backed right up so that he's got very little in the way of shots. And I'm pumping him, and there's a torch just around the corner. And the thoroughly tough to penetrate turret armor of the ST1, it's a monumentally well armored tank. Like, the turret is phenomenal, is just absorbing punishment, and there's not a lot of people who can actually pen this while you're moving, because the only weak point is a very small weak point around the hatch, and we nut that M103 good and proper. And you can see there, he's more of a heavium than a pure heavy. The Tort, great DPM tank, all that kind of stuff. At the same time, he's going to struggle to pen just the turret that's visible for the ST1 right now. And you saw I went through the cheeks of that M103. There is no going through the cheeks of the ST1. It is a legitimate block. It's a bunker on wheels. When it comes to going hull down, there are very few tanks in the game that can hold a candle to this thing. Maybe the T32 or the T29. Those kind of tanks are the tanks we're talking about. In terms of just pure bugger off, you're not penning me, this tank has got it going on in spades. And you can see he hit my gun there with that shot. He's absolutely desperate. He's in a bad position. He's not hull down. He's wide out in the open. You want to be hull down. Now, that's not to say tanks like the E75 can't hull down. They simply can. They just can't do it as effectively. But if you can find a situation where there's a very minimal amount of your turret and your hatch, which is a weak point in the 75 showing, then you can actually do very well. Now, this isn't just about the 75 and the ST1. What I'm talking about here is tactics you should be using on these big ass heavy tanks. And there's all intricacies right across all the tiers for each tanks, for its weak points and the things you've got to hide. But it's all about hiding those weak points. You can see no one can see my lower glaciers here. The only real shot a lot of these guys could pen me with is a hatch shot. And that's the shot that they're attempting to take. But at the same time, every time they do, they expose themselves to me and I can get shots on them. Like this IS-3, for instance. He has a terrible, terrible weak spot on top of his turret. And it's one of the reasons why if you ever see an IS-3 side scraping at you, aim about a foot above the gun and spank him. Because it's like 60 millimeters of armor on top of their head. There's that IS-6 and he's sideways. And you can just see, once you learn the penetration values of these tanks, you'll know who you can bully. And being a bully is a big part of being a heavy. It's not just about sitting at the back and waiting for everyone to fall on their sword and drive towards you and bounce you and shoot them. There will be times where you need to take the bull by the horns and actually push a flank or actually push through a one line. Now, a one line is a very simple thing. You know how the radar has grids and it's numbers and letters, and the one line runs straight down and it's the first line. I call the heavy routes generally the one line because what it is, it's the shortest possible route between the two spawns. So it's the easiest way for a heavy to get involved in the battle. Now I flanked all the way around, so I'm actually in the enemy's spawn area, gone past it, and I'm pushing the line. That's great. But you might say, well, you're in a really tough position here. What are you going to do? You know, you can still find spaces everywhere. Those rocks will allow me to side scrape, and I don't have to be right next to them to side scrape. You can forget the idea that you have to actually be touching the object for it to be effective. You can side scrape off something just by being far enough back that the only thing they can see is the actual sides of your tanks and they can't see your lower glaciers. And we've got the hill in the way here, and we've got that rock, and they can't put shots in us, and we're doing it really effectively. And that KV5 has come out into the open, which is a very, very poor idea. Now, there's a T-54 up there who's pushed way too hard. He didn't need to come down that hill to get shots on us, and he's left himself in a position that he is obviously regretting right now because we're spotting him nearly permanently, and there is a lot of fire that can come in from all over the place. And that's one of the big things that heavy tanks have going for them. They're so strong and they have so many more hit points than the other tanks that they can get out there and they can either leverage those hit points into shots for other people, which you'll see in just a short while, or they can put real pressure on and squeeze people into situations they just don't want to be in. And that T-54 likewise is stuck there, as are the IS-6 and the Tiger II. Because as far as they're concerned, this tank is just a beast. It's incredibly difficult to pen. And you can see I'm now side scraping off the rock in front of me. I've been using those rocks to hide me, and it allows me, even with a gun that's not spectacularly accurate, allows me to take so much time setting up that I can hit these shots. And that Tiger II has only really my top hatch, and you can see that's why my viewfinder's knocked out there. That poor old Tiger II is trying to pen my hatch at 250 meters, and that's the only real shot he's got. And what people often do is fire heat at you. Now, this goes in fair play for the T-54. He's got 201 millimeters of penetration. He can't afford not to be firing heat. He can't pen me any other manner. But I opened up my lower glacis. That's why I got hit. I went out wide open with the weak point available, and the 54 punished me for it, and that's fair enough. That was bad play, but it was all over by then anyway. Now you see this situation here. This is what I talk about by leveraging your hit points and your armor and being really aggressive and a bit of a bully boy. They've started a cap. They've got 3 or 4 tanks up here. We've got a cent that is in a tough space, and we've got a few tanks behind me. Now we could sit here and lose the actual initiative, but instead we push forward. Now we've got enough hit points to take some hits. We've now put this 54 in a horrible position, and he's screwed. Everyone else has pushed up on us. Now we're going to move all the way forward, and we're taking hits, but we are absolutely dusting him. We bounce this SP1C, we smash him senseless, and we're now moving down, and we've put a PTA and a louver on the corner here in severe panic and distress. The PTA is going to get one into me. Good on him. We're going to spank the louver, pull back, bounce another one with good angles. The louver's going to hit his mate again. Our louver's going to smack their louver, and then we're going to give him the big don't argue. Bugger off, buddy. You're done and dusted. Now that's what you do with a heavy tank when you've got little tanks in front of you and a big ass load of help behind you. And you always want to make sure that you're minimizing your weak points when you're doing it, but sometimes it's just how it is. Now this isn't anything of particular note, but I just want to point out that I'm driving an ST1 and I'm still really only ever going to show my turret to anyone who has an available shot. The ST1 has an incredible turret, and I'm going to use it as such. I'm going to use it as a tank that I can drive up here and shoot, and then no one's going to hit me because the thing is just made of, you know, it's like Wolverine's claws or something. It's unbloody breakable just about, this turret. Occasionally you'll get hit with a stupid shot that goes through a tiny slither of green on the very, very top of the hatch. But that's all there is to it. As long as you're smart about this turret and you know where the enemy is and you know what you're doing with them, they're going to struggle to pen you whatsoever. And on hills and inclines like this is exactly what you want to do. You see I'm dragging away because the further away, the harder it is for that IS-8 to see my lower glacis, and the more he just gets views of my big red turret. And then once they fire, you roll forward and you smack them. And you're going to see me doing the same thing here, the same kind of area that I was on that E75 on Vineyards, but I'm doing it with an ST1. And I wanted to try and be consistent across all the games that I showed you. And this is the last thing I'll show you, because I'm sure I'm boring you to tears. And you're going to see that I'm doing exactly what I was talking about on that hill there. I'm moving backwards and forwards so that if anyone pops on my right, if anyone pops on my left, the most they're going to see is a big red turret. Now, that M103 has been taken out on my left-hand side. There is still a tank there, but he's not really in a firing position, so I can just start worrying about these guys over here. And indeed, I am worried about these guys over here because all of a sudden, a whole heap of red guys have popped up in front of me. There's not really any tank in the game, though, that I'd rather be in this position with at this tier. It's such a strong tank, and it's so difficult to pen that for them to have any impact on me whatsoever, they're going to have to get us turned around and hit me from another angle, because I'm not really that fussed about these guys frontally. If they want to come out and have a crack at an absolute hull-down monster like the ST1, they're going to have to drive forward to do it. They're not going to be able to put shots into me from over the other side of the mountain. And you can see here, that's what's happening. The RU251, Nate, one of my subscribers, he's a great bloke. He actually had a really good game against, I think it was me and Hoodie, a couple before, and they went hog YOLO in the RUs and flanked us big time. But not this time. This time he's put himself in a terribly tough situation. And all the other tanks are not going to be able to help him either, because basically we've stopped their advance. They had a T30 and an ST1, and that's two very, very strong hull-down tanks. And they ground to a halt. So that's it, boys and girls. The ST1, the E75, they're the standard bearers that I used for big heavy tank tactics, proper big heavy tank tactics, not the little stuff, not the heavy M's, not the mobile, decent gun, decent armored profile tanks. I'm talking about the stuff that when given the right situation and given the right amount of time to set up, are absolutely devastating or can carry a flank with a big ass push and bully boy tactics. I'm Bushka on Blitz. I hope you've enjoyed that. That was a little bit longer than our normal fare, but I think it was really worthwhile. We haven't touched enough on heavy tank tactics in the last wee while, and this should really give you a big leg up, particularly if you're new to the game and you're wondering about how to play a hull down beast or a big flat side scraping monster. As always, if you'd like to support the channel, we are available. There's sponsorships. Go to the Patreon site. You'll see the link there on the video. And happy days. We'd very much appreciate that. That's why the channel keeps rolling, why the content keeps pouring out there. I do this full time. I just get you guys videos ASAP as much as possible. Anyway, thanks very much for having me. Look after your families and stay safe on the battlefield.